This is the 2026 Genesis G90 Black Edition, and it's the flagship ultra-luxury sedan from Genesis, which is Hyundai's luxury brand. It's intended to rival premier luxury sedans like the Mercedes-Benz S-Class and the BMW 7 Series, and it has a sticker price that's just shy of $110,000, making this the most expensive Korean car ever sold. Today, I'm going to review this G90 Black Edition and show you all of its quirks and features. Before we get started, are you ready for your next cool car? Sell your enthusiast car on Cars and Bids. Trading in your car to dealers means you aren't getting market value for your car, leaving you with less cash for your next fun car. Just look at our recent sales of these cool cars compared to current trade-in value. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is the trade-in offer, and this is the Cars and Bids result. Get started now on carsandbids.com. Sell on Cars and Bids and join the best community to sell your enthusiast car. All right, time for the quirks and features of the Genesis G90, starting with a little background. So this car, the flagship Genesis luxury sedan, came out back in 2017, and it debuted along with the Genesis luxury brand. This was Hyundai entering the luxury brand space, sort of like Toyota did with Lexus many years ago. Now we have Genesis. Now, this particular version of the G90 debuted in 2023, just a couple of years ago, and now we have the new Black Edition. In terms of pricing, the G90 starts around $94,000, and the Black Edition, which is the top-of-the-line model, starts around $108,000. By comparison, the Mercedes-Benz S-Class, sort of the premier car in this segment, has a starting price of around $120,000, and things can get a lot pricier from there. So this is kind of the value car. So let's talk quirks and features. What do we got going on? On the outside, big, full-size luxury sedan, has the size and it has the presence. It really looks like a big, luxurious, top-of-the-line sedan, which is exactly what it is. It's helped out in this appearance by the rear-end design, which is sort of this sloping rear, sort of like Rolls-Royce and Bentley models used to have throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, even into the 90s. It really has that big, full-size, opulent luxury road presence. And it has a couple of interesting tricks out here. One is the wheels. These are unique to the Black Edition, and they are surprisingly bling for the relatively understated Genesis G90. These sort of twisted 5-spoke wheels. I have a suspicion we'll be seeing these come into the modifying community for other Hyundai and Kia models down the line. For now, they're on the G90, and they certainly give it like a pop with kind of a distinctive look. This car's other big distinctive look on the outside is the turn signal situation up front. When it goes on, you can see on the side, the front fender, it appears in these big 2 horizontal lines. This obviously goes well above and beyond any regulation. They do it purely for style, and it gives the car kind of a presence, like it's turning and it's telling you it's turning and it's really making itself known. Now, obviously, the other big thing for the Black Edition is that it's all blacked out. Of course, this car is white, but all the trim is black. There's no chrome, no aluminum trim here. Everything is blacked out, from the wheels to all the trim around the windows. Basically, every trim you normally see, maybe in aluminum, is all black on this car, and that is distinctive to the Black Edition. And another thing you get with the Black Edition is a little extra power compared to the base level G90. So all Genesis G90 models have a twin-turbo V6. The days of the V8 full-size luxury sedan are gone, at least according to Genesis. But while the base model has about 375 horsepower, the Black Edition gets an E-supercharger, which is an electric supercharger powered by a hybrid system that boosts power up to 410 horses. This is also optional on the regular G90, but it's standard on the Black Edition, and it adds a little extra power, gives it some extra boost, and the result is 0 to 60 somewhere in the mid 5-second range, which is is pretty good for a full-size luxury sedan. Now you can see when you open the hood, obviously a lot of plastic trim here. Everything is subtle and covered up, but there is a plaque at the very front proudly announcing this is a V6 and it includes an electric supercharger, just to drive home the point that this has some extra grunt over a regular G90. But the really impressive thing about the G90 is the level of equipment that it offers, especially for the money compared to its full-size sedan rivals. You walk up to this car and you unlock the doors and the door handles pop out automatically. They reveal themselves so that you can pull them and of course open up the door. Now that's not all that unusual, but one unusual thing about this car is that it has power closing doors. So when you push on the door, it automatically closes. Unfortunately, like so many experiences I've had with power closing doors, it doesn't really work all that all that well. This is actually a problem I generally have with Genesis models. They have a lot of amazing features and several of them are guarded behind all these conditions that must be met before they'll actually work. And in this case, the power closing door, you can't just push it like every other power closing door. You have to tap it right on this little square on the door handle with your finger. And if you get the tap just wrong, it won't close. Okay. In theory, this works. But once you climb inside, you'll discover many, many more wonderful features that are a lot easier to access than those power closing doors. But the first thing you notice when you get inside is just how beautiful this interior is. Absolutely gorgeous in here. Very nice materials on every surface. Lovely leather. You can see there's wood trim on the dashboard, but it's blacked out in keeping with the Black Edition. In fact, a lot of this interior is blacked out, but everything in here just looks nice, feels good, and is totally commensurate with what you'd expect in a full-size luxury sedan. Maybe not quite as nice as BMW, which is a lot more daring and high-tech, or Mercedes-Benz, which is a little more opulent and elegant, but this is a really high-quality interior, very nice car, totally fitting the price point, and there's a lot of nice stuff in here. We start with the doors, which are a lot easier to close once you get inside because there are buttons. You can see buttons for the front and rear doors over on this side, and buttons for the front and rear doors over on the other side, so you can close all the doors from this little button pad. The driver's door also closes automatically when you put your foot on the brake pedal, like you're about to start up the car, which is actually a pretty convenient feature. Unfortunately, none of the doors open automatically. They only close, and because they're power closing doors, they have this mechanism in them that actually makes them a little bit difficult to open when you're manually kind of pushing against the mechanism. Frankly, power closing doors seem like a cool idea, something a luxury car should have, but the execution is always not the best, and that's certainly the case here. But many more wonderful features, starting with chauffeur mode. Okay, in your car, there's drive mode, sport, normal, comfort, eco, whatever. In this car, if you hold down the drive mode button, you are transported into a hidden mode called chauffeur mode. And when you're in that, obviously designed for chauffeurs carrying around a rear passenger, it softens up the suspension for a very soft ride, and it changes the brake pedal and accelerator pedal mapping. It allows for smoother braking, so the chauffeur doesn't jam on the brakes and annoy the rear passenger, and smoother acceleration for the same purpose. That is chauffeur mode. Never seen that before. I also love that when you change the drive modes, it also changes the seat bolstering automatically linked to the drive mode. So if you go into sport mode, the seat actually gets much more heavily bolstered. It's a little bit hard to show, but you can feel it on your body instantly, and very obviously it gives you kind of a sport seat that makes it harder for you to move around, to go back into comfort, and the seat becomes more soft and comfortable. Pretty cool. Interestingly, also in sport mode, the needles on the gauges turn into lava, which I don't really understand, but that's the situation. Here's another crazy quirk of this car. You look in the ceiling and there's these little buttons that say acoustic control. It turns out the G90 uses sound waves in the interior to try to cancel out the sound of road noise. They actually call them anti-road noise sound waves, which is intended to sort of neutralize exterior sounds and give you a quieter interior experience. It sounds like pseudoscience, but they've got these buttons all over the roof to distribute these sound waves in the interior and quiet things up. And how about this? You have climate control, air conditioning, and heat in your car. Here, the climate vents also blow out a fragrance. You can see the icon here in the climate control screen. You can turn on or off the fragrance, the scent of the car, and so it blows out the fragrance while you're driving along, in addition to your cold or hot air that you also have coming out. So your interior isn't just cooled or heated, it also smells nice. Another interesting quirk in here is the gear selector, which is a dial rather than basically anything typical. Park is a button in the center, but anything other than that, you have to twist a dial, and there's a color inside the dial that corresponds with the gear you've chosen, and it's all kind of futuristic and cool. Also check this out, an excellent piece of attention to detail. The stalks, turn signal and wiper stalks coming off the steering column are plastic, like they are in most cars, but the ends of the stalks are actually this higher quality textured gloss plastic, which feels better to touch. And they put that at the end because they know that's the part you're actually going to be touching when you turn on and off your turn signals or your wipers. So even though the signal itself is sort of the cheap plastic that everybody uses, the part you actually touch feels nicer, which is pretty cool attention to detail. And speaking of attention to detail, I also love this car has, like most Hyundai and Kia models, you put on your turn signal and a blind spot camera appears in the gauge cluster to let you know what's coming up in your blind spot, which is a really brilliant feature. I love to see that. Wish everybody would do this, but for now it's mostly just Hyundai and Kia, and it really makes lane changes a lot easier and safer. And speaking of technology quirks in this car, if you go into the infotainment screen, you have something called quiet mode. If you turn on quiet mode, it will only play music through the front speakers, and even then only at a volume that Genesis has determined is the appropriate level of quiet. I guess this is for nighttime driving, or if you have a rear passenger trying to doze off, if you're a chauffeur and you still want to have music on, you can sort of play it at a quiet level just in the front using quiet mode. And how about this? There's also a mood curator feature in the infotainment system, and you can choose between several different moods. And when you select a mood, an image appears on the screen that sort of corresponds with that mood, and it changes the interior lighting, the music, the climate control, even the fragrance to correspond with that mood in order to help put you in that mood. Instead of just like a song playing, it actually curates a whole experience inside the car using all of the car's features to correspond to your desired mood, which is pretty cool. Speaking of the infotainment system in this car, I should point out it's excellent. It's this big wide infotainment screen. It's a touch screen, so you can tap on it and it's very instantly responsive to your touch, or you can use this center controller, which is ominously placed directly next to your gear shifter. Do not accidentally put it in reverse while you're trying to change the song. But anyway, you can use either thing and it's all pretty easy, very intuitive, very simple, very high quality infotainment system that works fantastically. I think Hyundai and Kia have some of the best infotainment technology among all brands. Now, it's not quite the same story with the gauge cluster, which is a full screen, as you can see, very high resolution, looks good, nice graphics, but it's not immensely configurable. You can change the graphic that's sort of in the middle, in the back of the gauge cluster. And finally, Hyundai Kia Genesis is allowing us to put a map in this gauge cluster screen, which is nice to see. But other stuff in here isn't easily configurable, and it doesn't give you the option to see, like, I want to see my music and a map. Well, you don't really have that choice in here, which is disappointing. And strangely enough, when I tap on this little steering wheel button, it pulls up a warning that says widgets aren't available in this mode. I've changed every mode, the gear I'm in, the drive mode, everything I can think of, and the widgets never seem to be available, which is just another example of this Genesis flaw, where it has cool features, but you have to meet so many conditions that you can't even access the features. I don't even know what widgets I'm missing out on. What a shame. Now, interestingly, next to the gauge cluster, there are two rather large oval buttons. On the right, you have the switch for the interior dimmer to get more or less dim, which is kind of odd. On the left, you have a button to open up the trunk. You push and hold and that opens the trunk. Kind of weird placement for controls here, but they're here, and I guess they're kind of quirky. Speaking of quirky controls, to get out, you don't have a typical door handle since it's electronic. You push this button, and then the door releases. It opens up automatically, but then you have to push it open the rest of the way. And by the way, when you push the button, it corresponds with a noise. So you push the button, and the car makes a little noise confirming you're opening the door. Take a listen. It's subtle, but you can hear it. And next up, we move on to the back of the G90, which is hugely roomy. Full-size luxury sedan. There's always a big emphasis on rear seat room, and that is the case here. It is massive. You can basically lie down, even with the seats in sort of a normal position. Really, really large interior back here. It's a really nice place to be, very comfortable. There's even soft pillows mounted on the headrest that include the Genesis logo imprinted on the pillows. It is a very nice, luxurious place to be, and there are quite a few luxurious quirks and features back here. We begin with the rear screen, which you can see is mounted here. There's a touchscreen just for rear passengers, and you can use it to control a wide array of rear seat comfort and convenience features, like your climate control. You can turn on cold air, hot air, etc., all the climate control, and you can turn on heated and cooled rear seats. But it's not just that. You can also use this screen to turn on a rear massage seat, and not just a standard generic massage. You can choose between various massage programs that perfectly match exactly the type of massage that you wish to be receiving at that moment. You can also use this screen to adjust the various shades in the car, like the sunshade in the side windows or overhead or in the back, and you can use it to turn on interior lights, that sort of thing. Other controls in here are actually a little more interesting. This giant dial in the center does not control your rear seat screen. Instead, it controls the front screen. So you use this dial and you look at the front screen and you can see what you're doing and what you're adjusting. You can basically adjust everything from the front screen back here using this dial and just looking forward straight ahead. Clearly, this car is meant for chauffeur-driven rear seat passengers since they have access to everything, and since there's a chauffeur mode. You also have back here individual buttons you can see to close the rear doors. Each side rear door, press it, and the door closes automatically. And you have controls for the rear seats. You can see on the side here, you can move the rear seats in basically any direction, just like the front seats, for your optimal comfort situation. Also interesting back here, and very quirky. You can see in this little pocket, there's a wireless cell phone charger. Not that unusual, pretty standard. But if you open up the center console, you can see there's these little, like, things on the side and this button that says UVC. This center console storage compartment has a UVC sanitizing light. And so you put your device in here and you turn that on, and in theory it will get sanitized by this UV light source, and so it won't have germs on it anymore when you take it out. That's the theory anyway, and that's what's lurking in your rear center console. Kind of crazy. Of course, also some USB-C charge ports in here for charging your device too. Now, interestingly enough, this whole rear seat control screen area actually folds back up into the seat back in case you want to put a center seat passenger in here. Although if you do that, you lose a lot of cool controls, but you can sit 3 across back here. This is not just fixed in place. You also have a few other interesting controls back here, including a few buttons on the door panel that turn on some of the seat controls, so you can use a button to start them instead of the screen in case the screen is folded back, which is kind of nice to see. One of those buttons is marked rest, and if you press that, then the seat will actually fold itself into sort of a resting position like you'd see in an airline seat in first class. And on the passenger side, the front passenger seat will actually move forward and out of place to maximize the amount of space that the rear passenger has to lie down in that resting position. Also worth pointing out back here, you have little mirrors that deploy from the ceiling. You can open them up, and there's even a little light inside, so you can look at yourself while sitting in the back of your G90. By the way, one other interesting quirk back here, I mentioned there are sunshades on the rear windows, the side windows, and it's kind of quirky how they operate. When you go to close them, the main one closes up, and the extra one only starts closing later so that they can all finish closing at the same time. It's also kind of nice attention to detail, but the weird part is there's actually another tiny quarter window that isn't isn't covered by a sunshade at all. So there's actually 3 windows on each side in back. Kind of a strange design, but it's what they had to do to preserve the roofline to maximize rear headroom, and the result is 2 sunshaded windows back here, but not quite all 3. And finally, we move on to the trunk, which opens with a little button back here. You got the trunk. Actually nothing unusual or interesting or exciting at all, just a cargo storage area, pretty much exactly what you'd expect, including sizing from a full-size luxury sedan. Nothing too weird. I do want to mention, though, the market situation for this car. It's kind of interesting that it even exists, because the full-size luxury sedan hasn't exactly been a successful segment recently. More buyers are switching to SUVs, and a lot of full-size luxury sedans have been killed off. The Jaguar XJ is gone, the Lexus LS is gone, the Acura RL is gone. Wouldn't be surprised if we see the demise of the Audi A8 here pretty soon. It's surprising Genesis even has this car, and they're not selling that many. Only about 1,500 of these are finding buyers every year in the States. It's just not a hugely popular car, but I think it's a segment that Genesis feels they have to be in order to be a credible luxury brand. Nonetheless, wouldn't be surprised if this car doesn't see a new generation when it comes time for redesign in a couple of years, but for now, we've got it, and it's time to get behind the wheel and see how it drives. All right, driving the G90 Black Edition. The ultimate Genesis, the ultimate Hyundai, the ultimate Korean car. Like this is them doing battle with sort of the best from the Germans, but in a retreating segment. You know, I think Genesis feels like in order to be a real luxury brand, you have to have a real luxury car like this, but the buyers are just moving towards SUVs. Regardless, if you're one of the few people who's interested in a G90, a full-size Genesis luxury sedan, this is a nice car. There's a lot of great stuff to say about it. The driving experience is super, super comfortable, very, very smooth. I really like the way that it drives. And in fact, I think that the ride and the comfort and the smoothness is your #1 benefit of this car. It's just very floaty, very serene in here. It just feels very nice, very calm, very soft. Like, it's everything you want from a luxury car. Now, with that said, the calmness, the comfort, the serenity, all that is great. There are some drawbacks, especially compared to rivals, and I would say the drivetrain and powertrain is the biggest. This one has the E supercharger, which bumps up power a little bit, but I'm not loving this powertrain. I'm not someone who advocates that all the vehicles in this class need to have a V8. I think a good V6 really well done could totally diminish the need for a V8. However, there is a pretty significant hole in the power band when you first are stepping on the throttle. You have to get pretty far into the throttle and pretty high into the rev range in order to really build power from this engine. And I think the thing that Genesis hasn't yet figured out is one of the things that people love about luxury sedans. They've got all the features, they've got all the screens, the tech, the calmness, they've figured all that out. But one thing I think they haven't touched on, there's this effortlessness to powertrains of luxury sedans that this car does not have. You have to put in more throttle than you want to get anywhere, whereas in the S-Class, you just sort of tap the throttle and the power and the torque are there perfectly on demand. They don't make you work for it. They don't make you give an extra kind of pedal thunk. And then when you do push the pedal in extra in this car, you hear the powertrain working, the powertrain stressing a little bit more than you probably should, given what this car is trying to be. And I would say unquestionably, in my mind, the powertrain is the drawback of this car. And I think ultimately that's because, you know, they're adapting different powertrains to sort of make them work in this car. This does not feel like a bespoke luxury car powertrain. Now, the other thing worth noting here is that this car is not quite as quiet as its luxury car rivals. It's a little bit louder in terms of engine noise for sure, but even road noise and other vehicles and that sort of stuff. Now, it's not loud. It is a very, very quiet vehicle, but it doesn't quite have that S-Class feel. And I think one of the things that this car is really good at is succeeding against an S-Class on paper. If you compare it in terms of equipment, features, size, etc., like, you're thinking to yourself, why would anybody get an S-Class? But when you
you actually get in this car and drive it, you start to realize where that difference in price is made up. It's not just in the badge, which the S-Class also has going for it. It's in these kind of little things, these refinements that Mercedes-Benz has just gotten so good at over the years. Now, with all of that said, it is important to remember this car is a lot less expensive than a nice S-Class. And so if you want the luxury sedan feel, but you do not want to spend 7 Series or S-Class money, this car offers a really significant alternative, especially used versions of this car. Certified pre-owned are fantastic bargains and really, really nice cars. You're never gonna quite have the pinnacle car, but you will get a nearly pinnacle experience for a lot less money. And that's especially true if you're more concerned with equipment and features than like the little things like the perfect road noise, the perfect effortlessness of the pedal feel, that kind of thing. This car doesn't quite come there, but it does give you a lot for a lot less. And I think that's kind of the value proposition of the car. However, you look at sales figures and it seems that's not what buyers are interested in. Buyers who remain in the luxury sedan segment seem to be sort of old school badge buyers who want a very high-end car from Mercedes-Benz, BMW, etc. And they also want those little touches that those cars offer. And I think G90, as wonderful as it is and as good of a value as it presents, if this was 15 years ago when luxury sedans were still hot and people were still interested in that stuff, people would flock to this car. But today, the buyer pool has gotten so small and so specific with their desires that this car, though good, does not quite resonate. And I wouldn't be surprised if this car also does not see another generation when it comes time for redesign in a couple years. So there you go. Nice car, a lot of benefits, good value prop, but you know, full-size luxury sedan, tough market to enter. And this car has some nice benefits, but also some drawbacks. And so that's the new 2026 Genesis G90 Black Edition. This is an impressive car with some opulent, luxurious features and a smooth, comfortable ride, but it's a tough sell in a market where brand and brand name is really important, and Genesis isn't quite Mercedes-Benz or BMW, and in a market where buyers are increasingly ditching the luxury sedan for the luxury SUV. Still, this is a pretty nice luxury sedan, and now it's time to give the G90 a DougScore.
And the DougScore is here, 61 out of 100, which puts the G90 Black Edition here against some similar cars. The G90 holds its own, but it's truly hard to face off against rivals with a lot stronger brand names, better tech, more power, and better driving dynamics. Yes, the G90 is cheaper, but it also depreciates incredibly fast, which loses some of its value benefit. Overall, it's a great car in a very much dying segment, and I suspect the Black Edition is the beginning of the end of the G90 in general, as Genesis pivots more towards SUVs.